Okay, so it's my pleasure to introduce Hamilton Glass. Hamilton Glass's career as an artist stems from his architecture and design background. Despite working in the architecture field for 7 years, his passion for public art pushed him to start a career as an artist. Public art has always been a big influence and inspiration to him because of its power to influence and inspire the surrounding community. With every opportunity Hamilton is given to create, he tries to convey a message that connects his art to the community. Using his background in architecture, he creates images that reference architectural drafting practices, which are represented in the sharp lines, scale, and balance of the piece. The bright colors and unpredictable lines and shapes are used to convey energy and movement in each piece. Hamilton's work isn't just a singular canvas, print, or mural. One of the things he enjoys most is creating multi-layered projects that amplify many voices. In 2020, Hamilton founded two large projects, Mending Walls and All In Together, which were created to address the civil unrest and pandemic raging in our country. This was a way for Hamilton to process current events and share that opportunity for expression with others through art. Hamilton is always looking to use his art as an inspiration and healing tool in the community, as well as being a great example of a working Black artist. And with that, Hamilton, it's our pleasure to welcome you to Richmond Hill. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Pam. And thank you all for being here. It's always an honor to be able to kind of share my story and share the origins of Mending Walls, which so many people are asking about these days. But before I do that, I'd love to kind of get into myself, just so you can kind of see how Mending Walls kind of evolved from the work that I do. So I'm Hamilton Glass. I am native of Philadelphia, but my mother lived in Richmond, so I've never been a stranger to Richmond. I've always had family here in Richmond, so I was that city kid who was kind of bussed out to what I called the country. The country some summers to spend time with my grandmother and things like that. So Richmond has always been my second home. But growing up in Philadelphia, public art has always been this really big influence on me. I don't know how many of you all have been to Philadelphia. I'm sure some of you have, but there are murals everywhere in Philadelphia. And the awesome part about them is they're community-based. So they look like the neighborhoods in which they reside. But I had the kind of the traditional artist story pretty much. And I was a young kid, 5, 6 years old. I really don't know how old I was, but I was a young child who just loved drawing and painting and doing anything I could that was surrounding visual art. And how I know that is my mother literally put me in every art class imaginable. And I can, so much so that I can remember being like 12 or 13 in the Philadelphia Arts Institute with like people who were triple, maybe even quadruple my age, drawing figures. And I can remember at that time thinking like, this is not the comic books that I want to draw. She really believed in my work and really thought that this gift was something that was going to sustain me through life. But like most kids, I, in high school, wanted to explore me and kind of put down that paintbrush, if you will, or pencil. And honestly forgot about art for a minute. And I can remember when it came time to graduate, and a lot of my friends, came time to graduate, and it was time to pick a school and time to pick a major and things like, what do you want to do? I chose architecture. And I chose architecture because, I fell for that stereotype of a starving artist. I didn't have anyone around me who was, who was that example. And so what I wanted to do was kind of find a way to do something creative, but also make a good living. And because of that, architecture seemed like the perfect place for me. And it's funny the path you can go down to because of your perception. I can remember being that age and thinking like, well, every architect I see in the movies is rich. So I'm gonna try this architecture thing. But I immediately knew once I went to Hampton University, and once I got into architecture school, I immediately knew that it wasn't what I wanted to do. But I had a lot of, honestly, anxiety around college in general, and not too many people from where I come from went to school. So I was really, I guess, just anxious to do well. I wanted my parents to be proud of me. They were spending their hard-earned money to get me there. And I knew a lot of my friends didn't make it there. So I wanted to do well. And so I was like, well, I'm not changing majors. I'm just going to make architecture about art. And so that's what I did. And so 5 years later, architecture is a 5-year program. And I graduated from Hampton University in 2005. And when I did, honestly, I just followed that path of what I thought I was supposed to do. I stuck with architecture. And moved back to Philly for a year, then moved to New York, and then moved around to New Jersey and practiced every type of discipline of architecture, from residential to industrial to hospitality. And so in 2007, I decided to move out of New Jersey and find a cheaper cost of living, to be honest with you, and came back to Richmond and found a firm in Richmond and worked in hospitality, which is hotels and things like that. And so that was 2007. So 2008 comes by, and what happens in 2008? The recession. And so because of the recession, I mean, every industry was struggling in a recession, but in architecture, if there's no money, nobody's building anything. And if there's no money, they're not renovating anything either. So a lot of myself, including a lot of my colleagues, lost their positions as architects. And to be honest, once I lost my position as an architect, there was this switch that kind of flipped inside of me. And I started to reflect on kind of how my life was going. And I was like, well, you can do everything right. You can go to school, you can graduate, you can do well. And, some kind of catastrophic thing like a recession happens and you could be back at square one, or that's how I felt at the time. And I thought, well, this isn't cool. I don't love architecture. I'm not super passionate about architecture anyway. I need to figure out what I want to do. And so I turned back to art while looking for a job in architecture. Let me be completely real. I don't want to portray that this is a Cinderella story, because nothing ever is. And so while I was looking for another position in architecture, I was off for about a year and a half, and I created more art in that year and a half than I ever did in my life. And that switch that I was talking about was also, when that flipped, I also lost the fear of kind of failing in public, right? I'd already sat behind a desk for 7 years and gone through 5 years of schooling that was something that I wasn't passionate about. I really wanted to kind of do something that I was passionate about. And I want to be clear here. I still am not thinking, hey, I'm going to be a full-time artist. That's not what I'm thinking. But I'm thinking, hey, I'm doing something that I'm passionate about, right? Like I don't just go home, do this 9 to 5, go home and eat dinner and go to bed. I have something now that I'm passionate about. And so with losing that fear, I was very eager and and open to showing my work everywhere. So I would show my work in computer shops, coffee shops, small galleries, everywhere I could, everywhere that would accept me. And in doing that, I started to get more opportunities. And I can remember in 2009 or 2010, I had a small computer shop by the name of ALB Tech, in which I had just shown in, say, hey, I love your work. Would you do this mural in front of our building for me? And I have to remind people, in 2009, 2010, Richmond was not a public art city. There were no murals anywhere. It was a completely different art scene here. And I said, sure, I do murals all the time. I honestly lied, but I do murals all the time. I'll do one. And I did it. And honestly, I just fell in love with the process of making murals. Making art, making a piece of work on canvas and making a mural are two opposite things. And so I just fell in love with it. And so he asked me to do another, and that one was a little bit controversial. It spoke about the recession, and it was kind of a aggressive image with a politician holding a gun. And honestly, when I did that piece, I wasn't thinking about people consuming my artwork at all. And I'm not saying that to say I wouldn't have done it if I did think about that, but that's how green I was. It was kind of like, hey, this is just something I'm doing right now. Someone gave me this wall, do it. And I did that. And then I had, that kind of made the news. And there were some people who were threatening to have it taken down. And the way that they approached us about it was in a threatening manner. And I didn't like that. And we found out we didn't have to take it down, but I changed that mural to be a politician with an American flag over his mouth. So it talked about censorship. And so I think that controversy and that situation made me think about the accountability a public artist has and how to use it in the right way. And so from then on, it was kind of off to the races. I was like, I think that was the first glimpse that, hey, I would love to be a public artist. And so that opportunity gave me a lot of other larger opportunities. My third mural here in Richmond was a mural commissioned by Altria, which was about 80 feet long and 20 feet tall, and sat in the heart of Broad Street, right downtown Broad Street. And so at this point, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be a mural. I'm gonna be a muralist. But I ended up going back to architecture school. Again, this isn't a Cinderella story. I wasn't making enough money to kind of go at it full time. But I went back into architecture, and I was still gaining a lot of opportunities. So I would do my 9 to 5 with architecture, and then go paint from 5 to 12 or 1 or 2 a.m. And then by 2013, I had enough work to go full time. And so when I started working in Richmond, in around that time point in which I started working as an architect, but also, taking advantage of those opportunities that were now coming toward me. One of the first things I did was kind of reach out to organizations like Art 180 and Oakwood Arts and things Oakwood Arts did not exist at that time, but there were other organizations that did a lot of work like that. And I started to work with kids around public art and just around the power of art. For one, I wanted people to kind of know who I was, but for two, I wanted to learn the arts community here in Richmond. Again, it looked very different than it does now. And when I did that, I kind of fell in love with Art 180, and they gave me the opportunity to kind of make a lot of my projects. And because I'm from Philadelphia, this is kind of like second nature to me. This is something that, you know, I grew up seeing. It's very familiar with me. This piece that you all see here is part of a bigger project called What Do You Stand For? And myself and 4 other artists here in Richmond had the opportunity of leading 60 kids from Richmond Public School and creating these self-portrait projects that we created that traveled all through Richmond. Here you see it on Monument Avenue back in 2011. But for the whole year, it traveled to various sites. And so by 2013, like I said, I was a full-time artist. And honestly, it was amazing because Richmond was in this point in time in which we were just starting to kind of get murals and public art. And here I am at the forefront of that, but also seeing it happen very fast. So in 2012, Richmond received, this is a little known fact, in 2012, Richmond received over 30 murals in 1 month. And that was because the RVA Street Art Festival happened, and the Richmond Mural Project, which is actually run by a DC gallery that brought artists from out of town here to do it. So we had all of that art here in 1 month, and it was like the city caught, you know, the city caught fever for murals. But what I noticed when that happened was the work was really personal. It had nothing to do with the community. It was really personal, and it just spoke about the artist and things like that. And so being a Philadelphia native, I looked at that and I was like, there's a time and there's a place for personal work, and it's needed. But to receive, for example, 30 murals in a month, and none of them talk about the community, none of them talk about the places in which they live, or consider what the message they're sending are to their, you know, to their community, wasn't really ideal for me. And so I started to go the other way. And I started working with schools and community centers, using community engagement to kind of help power the projects. This particular slide is with Franklin Military, and I can't remember the other 2 schools, forgive me, but one was in Petersburg and the other one, I can't remember where the other one was. This is so long ago, but and it was kind of a joy to do, because people, you know, working this big is something people don't often get the chance to do, but also them being able to have the chance to have stake in the work is just as important. And so by 2014, I'm kind of off to the races. And again, using community engagement in my work is super important. I've had the opportunity of working with probably every art institution here in Richmond, and a lot of other organizations as well. And going into schools was one of those things that I deemed very important, not only because there are children in there, but if you think about it, me being able to now be a public artist, I was that example that I didn't have, right? I didn't have some living, breathing artist to say, hey, you can do this. But being able to work in schools and make these bright, colorful, beautiful things, I was able to go talk to the art classes and things like that to kind of be that example that I didn't have. In 2013, one of the other projects that really fueled my conviction around these community engagement projects was Light of Human Kindness. And this project was headed by a woman named Patience Salgado, who calls herself a kindness worker. And the work that she laid out to do was to inspire 1,000 kind acts. And she did this by collecting stories through Tumblr of light and dark, and then having the community come out and paint them. And then we partnered with the Martin Agency, who wired this 150-foot wall with 1,000 LEDs that was connected to an app in which you could kind of tell your stories of light and dark in the wall. And each story was connected to a light bulb. So you could go in front of it, put in your story and a light, and pick the light that you want, and it would make one of these lights light up. And the amazing thing about it was we also used this conductive paint. So we had like hot spots on the wall in which people could hold hands and make the lights do animation by just the power of our hands, you know, touching those hot spots. In 2013, that was a big deal. Now there's so much technology out, but like 2013, I mean, I think a pint of that conductive paint that we use cost like $2,000. Now it's probably like $100 or something like that. But yeah, and so this was like the first project that I did that, you know, people really gravitated toward beyond the art. And it started to make me kind of like understand the power of art, even beyond just community engagement, and how it could bring a community together around stories and kind of, you know, show that we're all human, right? We all can connect, and people get different things out of it. But it was just amazing to see people coming to this wall every day while I was painting it, and not for the art at all. It was just solely because they wanted to read the stories, right? These stories were anonymous stories, and they were amazing. And there were many people who would come and just kind of, it was a little weird because there were people who would come and talk to me and just cry, and it was just a breathtaking project for me. And so a little further on in my journey, one of the things that I like to do with art in general and talking about the power of art is creative placemaking. If you all have not heard that, or creative placekeeping, if you all have not heard that term really speaks about how art can take a place and really evolve it and get people to pay attention to it. Make it a place where people come sit, talk, enjoy, learn, or even, you know, clean up. And so I always show this side because the Arthur Ashe Tunnel in Battery Park is a really good example of that. I've gotten some corporate sponsors behind this project, and and we made this happen. This tunnel is a breezeway between the basketball and the tennis side of the park, and of course a road splits above it. And so before this project, this tunnel was always closed, and it was dirty, it was dingy, it had no lights, because the city was scared negative things could happen in there. I'm sure they probably did. And so being able to do this and approaching the city with it, they paid for the lights, and you know what I mean? And now they keep the tunnel clean. And so using art as a tool to get people to pay attention to areas or places that can be kept up is a really powerful tool, and it's one of the things that I use in my work. And so this time here in Richmond now, I think most people know me as the community engagement guy, but it's really about more than that. It's about using public art to get people to connect with one another. And so I've taken part in a ton of street art festivals, and I've worked with a ton of different small profit organizations here that really speak to that. Girls for a Change is a project that honestly I heard these young ladies talking to a forum of people to talk about how they wanted to see themselves, and it had nothing to do with art, but I heard that speech and got inspired and was like, hey, there are no murals in Richmond that talk about Black women. Let's go work with, Girls for a Change and have them design this piece, a piece that talks about them, and then have them help paint it. And so we made that happen. And this is on First in Broad Street in downtown Richmond. It's really hard to see. It's really one long piece. I know it's shown in 2 slides, but it's 160 feet long. So it would be really small if I showed it in one long slide here. But in doing this, you can imagine my partnerships here in Richmond kind of span wide now. It's one of the things I'm most proud about, being able to work with small and large institutions here in Richmond. This particular piece is with the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. And it was kind of my first dealings with them. I was a part of the Fresh Paint exhibit here in Richmond. And if anyone knows the complicated history behind the History Museum in general, you can imagine when they called me up to do this, how nervous I was, because I wasn't going to do anything but speak my truth about how I felt. And so they were ecstatic about it. And because of that, I've done a multitude of projects with them. And I think they are a really big example on how Richmond is now kind of changing and coming to find its new voice, voice here in Richmond, which I think we all are doing. Richmond is changing so fast, and then we all need to be a part of it. I'm spending entirely too long on myself, so I'm going to speed this up. And I'm not going to explain every project, but this one was Richmond Cycle Corp, and is Richmond Cycle Corp, and I approached them about painting this mural in 2019. And for those of you who know Richmond Cycle Corp, they're an amazing group, and they started a cycle program within Armstrong School. But honestly, the least that they do is that cycling stuff. And I approached them because they, of course, are always in the news for the wonderful work that they do in cycling, but the mentoring that those guys do around these young men who sometimes don't have access to a lot is just amazing. And I wanted to highlight that. And so I've done, again, a multitude of projects here in Richmond that revolve around that community engagement. And I'm going to move forward a little bit just so I don't spend so long on myself. So I'm sure if, you've driven past my work here in Richmond, and I'm blessed to be able to have worked here for, this is my 10th year anniversary of being a full-time artist in Richmond, and have touched and worked with a lot of different organizations here. The reason it's so important for me to kind of explain myself at first is because before I get into Mending Walls, is because I don't want you to think that this was a one-time thing in terms of Mending Walls. Art is something that I use here in Richmond. I work with the VMFA to do the RVA Community Makers Project, which was just unveiled this week, actually. So please go see it, where we highlight grassroots Black leaders here in Richmond. But it's really important to understand that art can be this vehicle that brings connection, because I think one of the things that we all are connected to or attracted to as human beings is art, like creativity in general. I think is one of those things that we just, it's part of the human condition, it's part of the things that we love. And so in 2020, when the murder of George Floyd happened, I was in a bad place, as I imagine a lot of us were. And I had a fellow collaborator reach out to me by the name of Matt Lively, who I collaborate with a lot. And Matt is white, I'm Black. But we actually work together a lot because we're so opposite. I think we're quirky like that. But he reached out to me and was just asking me how I was doing. And I told him I wasn't doing well, but probably not for the reason he thought. And at that time, I couldn't understand why there were so many people who are just now starting to not wake up, but be vocal about someone being killed, right? For me, as a Black man, it doesn't take an 8-minute video to understand that kind of thing is unjust. And, 2 weeks prior, Ahmaud Arbery had been murdered in the street too, and we did not see the same reaction. And that bothered me. It really bothered me. And so in that conversation with Matt, he started telling me what it meant to him. And he immediately, sorry, I have this cough I'm trying to get rid of. He immediately started telling me, the minute he saw that video, he felt bad for dismissing the others. And when he said dismissing, he didn't mean that he thought those other people were innocent, or deserved it. But he just meant like, he didn't have that experience. He's never seen anybody in that position before, right? And me, I've seen my friends in that position. I've been harassed by the police. I've gotten the talk from my dad, hey, when somebody pulls you over, you know what I mean? You do this. And so those two different experiences cause us as human beings, right, to react differently to the things that we see on the news, to the things that we talk about, just the politics in general, to our interests, politics in general. And so I got off that call feeling a little bit better, only because I had this great exercise in empathy that just took place on the call. And I could understand where he was coming from and knew that, empathy was kind of the answer. We all have as human beings, we all look out for our own interests. But if we don't know any better, if we don't know another person's condition, we can't connect with it at all. And so I wanted to put together a project that really kind of emulated what we needed to do as society. And thus, Mending Walls was born. So my idea was to put together artists, public artists from all different backgrounds, to have a conversation around social and racial justice. And so it was really important that these artists be from different backgrounds because they had to have different experiences. But once they had that authentic, and that's really important, that authentic conversation, then they would come together and create work, murals that spoke about it and spoke about each other's voices. Collaborating in general is a really tough thing to do. I'm not sure how many of you have collaborated with someone, especially on an art project, right? A visual art project. It's a tough thing to do. But then throw social and racial justice on top of that, right? Everybody's voice has to be heard. And it's almost impossible, if you will. It's a really tough thing to do. And so this project would be, just a really good exercise in what we need to do as human beings and society. I always kind of cringe announcing this as a public art project because from the beginning, this project is about the conversation, not just the art. And so in that conversation, in the beginning of this project, what I wanted to do was have civic talks that spoke about the art, but then got into the issues that the artists wanted to talk about, right? What the artists were talking about. And you have to remember the climate at the time. There are people in the streets, speaking their minds on what should be happening. And so this was a platform for artists to be able to have that real authentic conversation and really push out their thoughts about, how they felt and them connecting with someone else who did not have, might not have the same views. And so Mending Walls began. And on the kicking off of Mending Walls, we had a slogan called "We Need to Talk." I'm skipping over a lot of stuff because I just don't think I have enough time to tell you all, but "We Need to Talk" was really a Juneteenth installation in which all of us artists went out. And at the time, all of the businesses were boarded up downtown and in Cary Street and Shacklebottom. Bottom. And we stenciled these "We Need to Talk" stencils all over downtown. It purposely did not say Mending Walls because I wanted to be discreet in what was about to happen. And what was about to happen was we were about to create 16 murals all over Richmond that spoke about different social and racial justice topics. And so I want to be really clear. I didn't tell any of these artists what to do, what to talk about, what to say. And in asking for permission and gaining donations for the walls that we painted on, those owners and small businesses had to be aligned with that mission as well. So they had no input into the work that was created on their buildings. They really came directly from the artists. And so we were fortunate enough to have a film crew by the name of 19 Red that reached out to us really early and said, "Hey, we want to follow you everywhere." So there's a Mending Walls documentary that has captured all of this whole origin story of this project, even painting it. And that can be found on our website along with PBS. And we just recently learned that there will be a national debut of Mending Walls on public broadcasting channels, PBS, all over the United States. So that's a really big deal. But I'm not sure how many of you have seen the documentary. Okay, great. So I'm not going to bore you all with. There's some trailers that I have in here, but I'm not going to bore you all with the trailers. But let's go. But I will let you all see some of the work that was created for it. Again, going back to my partnership with the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, in Mending Walls, we had the opportunity to partner with 3 different museums. The History Museum was actually the site of the first Mending Walls project, and they even created a Mending Walls exhibit for us. And so when we started this, we literally kicked off 1 mural a week. If you can imagine how insane that is, I'll never do it again. But we kicked off a mural a week. And so this was the first one. It was done by Joe Arnice and Ian C. Hess. And that gentleman to your right is Marcus Davis Peters. And the woman to the left is no one in particular, but it speaks to the hair bill that was actually passed around the time of that coming out. One of the things that you'll notice about a mending wall, or the way you can tell that something is a mending wall, a mural is a mending wall, is that there are plaques on them, metal plaques on them that have the artist statement for the piece, but also a QR code that takes you to the website in which you can listen to the podcast. So every single mural has a podcast where I'm interviewing the artists, and the artists are speaking about that initial conversation that they had. What I wanted people, the reason that's so important is because each one of these pieces, of course, they're beautiful, right? And they look great, but there was a conversation that was had at first that really pulled this together. And there were things that actually were happening at the walls that pulled these together. you have to remember at this time, I keep saying that, but at this time, there were people protesting in the streets while these artists were painting it. So you can imagine the questions, the debates, all of the things that happen around these pieces. And so I wanted people to be able to not just see the work and say, oh, that's beautiful, I get it, this is great. I wanted you to be able to study each wall, understand the artist, dive into the conversation, and really, kind of start your own conversation about the work with others that, you pass by these with. This particular piece was done by Noah Scalin and Alfonso Perez. This might be my favorite piece. And the reason it's my favorite piece is there's so much intention in the work that happened in this. I mean, I always say this, but pun intended, down to the shoestrings in some of these pieces. And this particular piece is only white, black, and yellow because it is across the street from the VCU police station. And so they were in heavy dialogue with some of the members of the police station at that time. If you remember, at that time, police still are not the most popular people, but at that time it was even worse, right? And so that's the reason why they chose these colors. And little gems like that are all in the podcast. They really speak about the work that they were doing, but also this is like a visual representation of two people not being able to stand up unless they help one another. And I think I just find it very beautiful. And that's Noah and Alfonso. Print and Charles are also two of my favorite ones. One of the things I bring up with theirs is, with each one of these projects, of course, we had community engagement days. Because of COVID, they had to be small, but these gentlemen did the face that you see in front of you are two Greek gods, and I need to remember their names. I never do. But one speaks to breathing in all the bad and destruction, and one speaks to breathing out new growth and light and things like that. And so I think Shiva is one of them. But in doing that and having the community engagement ahead of time, one of the things that they did was get the volunteers to kind of like almost journal on the wall with spray paint and talk about how they were feeling at the time. And these engagement days were super important because, one, it gave people an opportunity to do something. That's one of the questions that I would ask, like, hey, why are you here? A lot of people were just home and like, hey, I just want to do something. Like, I want to help, right? There are people protesting in the street. I can't go to a protest, but I can do something else to help spread this message. And then two, to get people familiar with this project and start those conversations. So you'll kind of notice that all of these projects revolve around conversation. That is the heart of this. And so they had people come up and do that. And then after they did that and they wrote their feelings on the wall, they primed the wall black. So it was like a semblance of the breathing out, the breathing in the bad, and then just starting fresh with a new platform. This piece was Matt Lively and myself, and I always call this my cheat wall because Matt Lively and I knew one another, even though we're from different backgrounds. But I really wanted to create a piece of work that really memorialized the conversation that we had that really honestly inspired Mending Walls for me, or what became Mending Walls for me. And so it really is a depiction of the two of us and our experiences growing up in the middle, crowned with the Dukes of Hazzard car on the top, which of course, no one talked about in terms of like being named the Lee. It was the Lee, I believe. And so there's countless, like I said, there are 16 of these. So this work, there's countless of these kind of murals all over Richmond. Like I said, they kicked off one at a time, and 1 week at a time. And some of them went over a week, but that didn't mean we held back on starting another project. So at one point, I believe there were 4 of them going at one time. And so it was just amazing to see all of this happen in Richmond, and the conversation that happened behind them, because they all really do have their own story. And there's so much intention behind the work that they created here. And so moving forward in 2021, we didn't do 16 murals, I promise you that. But we did 4 murals in Richmond. And this time we took it a little bit further and brought a third collaborator into the project, and worked with organizations such as the Richmond Association of Black Social Workers, St. Cofield Community Orchard, Virginia Community Voices, and who was the 4th? I'll think of it in a second. But we use those organizations as a 4th collaborator, and had artists work with them to create the work. And none of the work that we did in 2021 is on this slide. So I'm still showing 2020 work, but I wanted you all to know where this has been going. And so we continued the podcast, we continued the civic talks, and now we're trying to do work, continue the murals, but also do work with other mediums, because Mending Walls, again, is not a public art project. It is a project that's really supposed to fuel connection and empathy. And so what better way but to use different mediums of art into doing that. And so we're in the process of working with Richmond Urban Dance, the Brown Ballerinas. We're working with Roscoe Burnham, if you all are familiar with him, the first poet laureate here in Richmond, who's doing a project around Mending Walls. So it's kind of my mission now to kind of get this beyond murals. It started with murals because it was connected to me, but I'm in the process of trying to help empower other artists to kind of take this on and use this motto to start more conversation around racial and social justice. Because the big thing is, it sounds cliche, but we are all the same. We just have different experiences, and those different experiences aim our interest, right? So we need to know everyone experiences to have a just world. And that's the only way we're going to get anywhere, is to really be able to empathize with everyone, which is a hard feat to do. It's not easy, but excuse me. But if we can see everyone's stories and understand that we aren't the center of the universe, then I think that we'll make legislation will be better, and we in general will just have a better condition. So I think I'm on time. I can talk more, but it's on time. I'll plug the documentary again. So the documentary, excuse me, is really an amazing video. And I know I'm biased because I'm in it, but it really, what I like to stress about the documentary is that you see this perfect project being executed, but this, May, the end of May is when I thought of Mending Walls, and by July 1st, we were painting our first mural. So if you can imagine what it takes to corral 30 artists, get Hands-On Greater Richmond Community Foundation, get a website up, talk to building owners about donating walls, arrange civic talks, start a podcast, all of that in a month, it's a really hard thing to do. But the project is really a reflection, the success of the project is really a reflection of the people who took part in it, because they made all of that happen. We made all of that happen. And the fact that it is continuing today is kind of I think is a testament of Richmond. And we are continuing our mission. And people are honestly paying attention outside of Richmond. We've been to 4 different states and spoke about this work. We recently just left Penn State, who wants to start their own Mending Walls project. And so this is a movement. My goal is to create all these little ripples around the country, and then have those ripples kind of make a statement. And it's just amazing how this project is doing so. So I'll be quiet and take any questions that you have. Thank you for your time. I'm ecstatic to be here telling you about the work.
Thank you so much, Hamilton. And feel free to take a sip of water. I feel so bad with your, you have to keep going. But thank you so much. That was absolutely beautiful. So as you guys think about what questions you have for Hamilton, Lindsay and I will get us started. And then at the end, we'll hear from Lindsay about Richmond Hill and Mending Walls. So I was just curious, Hamilton, as you were talking, what has been the effect on the artists talking across difference? So for example, have they stayed friends? Have they gotten close even beyond the project? Or if you can talk to that.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. One of the joys in this project was having the opportunity to almost play God a little bit in this, in terms of like being able to match people together. And so I get this question, and I always get the question, how did you match people? And what was really important to me, and why I'm kind of have the conviction now that I was the person to do this, was of the space that I sit in Richmond. So there is a celebrated side of Richmond, and then there's like a non-celebrated, and I'm talking about in the art community, a non-celebrated side in Richmond. And so I personally was really interested in people's networks, and the easiest way to do that now is to see who's following who, right? Like, what type of people are following Ed Trask, and what type of people are following Ross Brown, you know? And so that is the way I paired people, and it worked beautifully. And honestly, I got that from my collaboration with Matt Lively, if I'm thinking about it, because when I first met Matt Lively, we met at the 2012 Street Art Festival, and we kind of like hit it off. But one of the things that we did there, and that was his first mural, I think he told me, one of the things that we did there is I only posted his progress on my social media channel, and he only posted mine. So we made our networks talk, right? We made our networks at least cross. And so that's what I did here. And honestly, I can confidently say that the Mending Walls project has literally changed the artscape in Richmond for public artists. There are so many more collaborations happening now between those artists, and not even the same pairs. There are a lot more art organizations here now than when I first started. But they are, since they're so exposed to one another, I'm just seeing the fruit of it. So yes, to answer I'm sorry, that was a long way to answer your question.
No, but you did.
They are definitely doing a lot of work and collaborating a lot more.
Wonderful. Thank you. Lindsay?
Yeah, thank you so much. This is awesome. And I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about, like, I don't know if I can articulate this question in a way that makes sense to you all, but when you talked about the difference between telling a personal story and like a more civic or community story, and when you were talking about your kind of evolution as a muralist, can you talk more about how that plays out in the Mending Walls, and like kind of the relationship between the personal stories and the civic or public stories?
Do you mean in the artwork?
Yeah, like the kind of the stories that the art tells, and like how that like how the kind of people, the stories about people become stories about the place.
Yeah.
Or if that happens.
No, that's great. So the stories, the thing about this, right, was that organic piece. And so I think there was a natural progression going through the initial 16, right? And it was the first ones were all about place. And then towards the end, they started turning about people. And I think I'm going to be a visual shower at this, but I think this one was kind of the start of it, in terms of, if you all know Duran Chavis and his partner, they do a lot of work around food justice here in Richmond. And when Andre Shank and Just Ray approached me they didn't approach me. They weren't asking me for my permission, but they approached me and told me what they were doing. This is a rendition of American Gothic, right? Which is a painting with a farmer with a fork. Mm-hmm. And the original painting is a older white farmer with his pitchfork and his wife standing next to her. And so originally I thought, when I looked at this, I thought the idea was genius, but I started thinking, like, are we glorifying a person here, right? Like, it wasn't my place to say, but are we glorifying a person? But honestly, I think what it started to do was more so glorify Richmond over the person. Like, it's glorify all of these things that Richmond has, and that other places might not have or don't have as much as. And what they were trying to do, what they were trying to do was also give people access that way, right? Like, knowing, once you hear about Duran and his story, if you have any interest in that, you go run to Duran and say, oh, I didn't know you did this, and things like that. We also talked about, actually planting stuff on this site. It just turns out that the site was so small, we couldn't do it. So we were trying to be intentional in every way. But I think those broad, even the larger ones that got really personal started talking about the broader aspect of Richmond. It was really about amplifying people's access to things and not, staying one-dimensional in terms of that. Hopefully that answered your question, Lindsay.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so anyone who has a question, maybe use the hands or just unmute and start asking. Or commenting. It doesn't have to be a question, just whatever you'd like to say. Cheryl Burke, please.
Yes, thank you so very much, and good evening to everyone. Hamilton.
I'm smiling, Cheryl. Hey.
I'm sure you are. You are absolutely beyond words of which I can express. Number one, I met Hamilton a few years ago at a project. I thought I knew all of your work, but seeing this tonight, you are, I think I know your work when I see it, but now I know that I don't. completely. I am so proud of you. And I must say on behalf of our students in Richmond Public Schools, he didn't share this at length, but including the work that he did at the Martin Luther King Bridge, the work at Franklin Military Academy, which that was in partnership with an organization that I'm in. Also including what I just enjoyed at ML King in their mindfulness room.
Oh, yeah.
You have inspired our students. You have also shared so much history in your work with our students. I am just so delighted and so appreciative of what you're doing. And I feel at this point of what you've shared tonight, and I thank Richmond Hill for this opportunity to, this is why I signed up on a Friday night, okay, Hamilton, because of you, okay? Because of you, all right? But he has so much, but the Blue Sky Project, so much has been done, especially in the 7th District, the east end of the city of Richmond. And I look forward to our students. I'm thinking about the Oliver Hill Project, or Oliver Hill, the Capital Catholic Charities Wall, that had students from Armstrong High School and a teacher who lives in the East End, where one of our students from Armstrong was so humble, she couldn't attend because she was just that shy and just so taken aback that she is on the wall of a building.
Oh, wow.
And will be there forevermore. Exactly. And the young man that was painted there as well as a freshman at Virginia State University. So we're so proud of that. But I want you to know that you are changing the mindsets of our children. And we need that, our students, our young students that are fighting for their identity. As you shared your youth in Philadelphia. So thank you. You know, I'm gonna be calling you soon because now I've seen some things. Gotta take it to another level. Thank you so much. I appreciate you and Richmond Hill. God bless you.
Cheryl brought up a really good point that I have to comment on.
Please.
Which is the intention. I'm not going to take credit for the intention that the artist put into this work. The particular piece that she was talking about in terms of the student who didn't come because her face was on the wall. I didn't know that, for one. Two, the artists Kevin Orlinsky and James Storehill had the idea of including the community in their wall. And so those are individuals that you see in this painting right here. And so they also had a ending ceremony in which they got to unveil this piece. But also so many other of the walls, there were artists who used that creative placemaking that I spoke about earlier to hold events at the walls, to I believe Duran planted at another wall, at the Blackwell drip wall that I showed earlier. He planted, I can't remember. I'm not going to try to remember what he planted, but he planted a couple, and they made it like kind of a contemplating space where people could come sit. And Keith Ramsey came and built a bench or two. And so they were so intentional at the work that they did. And so we put them in contact with the building owners, of course, and they got permission to do things at these sites. And so that is the power of public art. You don't just paint a building and walk away on some, in most cases. You're able to actually make it a place in which people can inhabit and appreciate and actually celebrate. So thank you, Cheryl.
Great.
My pleasure, my blessing.
Who else has a question or a comment? Kristen, you wrote something in the chat, and Lisa, would you like to say anything? Either of you?
I'll jump in. I wanted to thank you, Hamilton. I've seen lots of your work and not known that exactly who it was, but this makes my heart happy. I watched the documentary and absolutely loved it. but I'm going back to watch it now, having your context to make me appreciate it even more. And Lorna Pinckney was one of my closest friends. I preached her funeral, as a matter of fact. And so to see you having honored her in the manner you did, looking forward, Finding Tomorrow, it absolutely warms my heart. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to share something about Lorna, and it goes into Lindsay's question about the people and place also, because this mural is so special to me beyond words. For one, I'm gonna sing its praises first. So this mural last year received top 10 in the country by USA Today. So wow. On Lorna's birthday, by the way.
Wow.
Two, I had been speaking with friends and family about doing a piece for Lorna before the Mending Walls project was ever created. And we were, going back and forth, talking about how much it's going to cost and all the logistic stuff that holds up these types of things. But I can remember when Duran's mural went up, and a family member reached out to me and say, "Hey, where's Lorna's mural? Duran is up. Where's Lorna's mural?" And my response to them was, "What? This isn't about that. Like, this is a it goes into that personal and community, Lindsay, that you were talking about before." And I was like, "This isn't about that. Me and my collaborator are having a conversation right now. And, I'm not here to, especially as, I guess, the leader of this project, I'm not here to force anybody to do anything like that." And so but respectfully, and I was talking to her respectfully about that. And then I went back to my collaborator, Eli McMullen, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to talk to him about it. I know, whatever. I felt really bad. I was like, there's this woman named Lorna, and I told him about Lorna and told him, I knew Lorna, and we kind of, yeah, that's cool. And then the next time we met, he knew more about Lorna than I did. Right. And so I'm still hesitant. I'm thinking, am I influencing this guy to do Lorna and this and this and that? And we had some more conversations. So we entertained it a little bit more. And then when I went to go do research on Lorna, I went to her Instagram, and I was the second to last photo she posted before she passed. And it was at the Street Art Festival.
Yeah.
And it was me in it. And I was like, I never knew that. And then I looked at the start date, which we started these every Monday. The start date for this project was it the day she passed? It had some anniversary to Lorna. And it was just like, okay, that's it. It was like, okay, that's it. And it was just kind of like smooth sailing from then on. And I just kept getting little signs from Lorna while I was painting this piece. The necklace that she has on, honestly, I was painting her face, and just this necklace flashed in front of me. I stopped everything I was doing and painted that necklace in 5 minutes.
Wow.
And I was told by a friend of hers that she always wore these big necklaces
and bright eyeshadow. So that it's funny to me that you even have the eyeshadow.
Yeah. So it was just the experiences, and then this getting that award on her birthday.
Yeah,
was amazing too. So there's so much, but I'm honestly, I'm most happy that I get to see her every time I go to Jackson Board now.
Right. Right.
But the people who came up from DC, who come up from DC to see this piece, because the work she does in DC and stuff like that, it's just been amazing to see that. And it's really hard to explain this, but Eli and I, in painting this, really didn't even communicate much. We just painted it. All of those symbols that you see on her garment are Adinkra symbols that describe her in her work. And it's just one of my, this is my favorite mural in Richmond. Right?
Wow, mine too.
And I don't say that about me. A lot of people ask, what's your favorite mural? I'm like, it's definitely not mine, but I just love seeing Lorna. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
She turned me on to Hamilton glass before she passed. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Nikki, you put something in the chat about your students. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. Hamilton, I just wanted to thank you. This presentation today just feels so timely, especially after conversations that I've been having in and out of the classroom with people who have all of this creative potential and really want to dedicate time to art projects, but don't feel like they can give themselves permission to prioritize it because they're thinking about money. And so I would love if you have any advice that I can offer some of my students, especially I work with college students, but especially some of my minority students who are feeling really hesitant about taking that risk of going into art. If you have any advice that I could pass along to them, that would be great. Otherwise, I might just say, maybe you should go work with Hamilton on one of his murals.
Well, I mean, the most important advice is exposure. Like, I think they need to reach out to someone who's doing what they want to do. I don't know. That's why I spoke about that switch, because we all know somebody who you've seen their artwork and it's beautiful and it's amazing. And you go like, why aren't you showing this? And they go, it's not ready. It's not. It took me like, going through however many years of architecture and still, calling myself doing the right thing, but still it not feeling like the passionate thing, and understanding that my life, my time is ticking, right? Things are going by. And so I want to do something that I'm passionate about. That's when I was like, you know what? I'm just going to show this stuff, right? And we live in this society in which everything has to look perfect. And I think what was healing for me around that is in public art, you make all your mistakes in public, right? Like, that is the process of public art. A lot of people think I get off of these things and go, that's amazing. I don't. It's far from it. You can make, when you're that close to these things, nothing ever looks perfect. You see all the mistakes, you do all of that stuff. A lot of people ask me, like, how does it feel to ride past your murals all the time in Richmond? And I have over 300 murals in Richmond. I have a lot of murals in Richmond. But it doesn't feel as great as you think it does. It's like, if you remember when you've done it might be a poem or a piece of artwork or something when you were younger, right? And then you pull it out years later and go like, what was I doing? That's my life. That's my life. That's what I deal with. But here's the thing, we're all human. We all do that and we all grow. And as long as you feel like that, you're growing. And so, it's really about exposure. And what I'm also really thankful for is Mending Walls has took to the educational sector better than any other sector. So, like I just mentioned Penn State, but we are working with U of R to create workshops around the Mending Wall project, and kind of like bring together the tours and all of that stuff for students and things like that, and make a story map. We're working on a story map also. So we're working on some really big things, but it is really centered around exposing people to this stuff and letting them take over and do their own thing with it. Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
No, that was great. And I'm thankful to be exposed more to work that you're doing, so I know who I could introduce my students to. So thank you.
No problem.
Great. Kristen, did you and Joel have something you'd like to say? I know I saw you put something in the chat.
And we've got a hand up too.
And yeah, Hyatt, go ahead, Hyatt.
All right. Thank you so much, Hamilton. This is just so, I don't know, I just feel really inspired by this. And I have seen the film, but tonight for some reason is especially affecting me and inspiring me. And I'm wondering what process there is for an organization to sort of apply to collaborate with Mending Walls.
Yeah, so there is no specific process right now. We have, you are always welcome to reach out to us through email, mendingwallsrva@gmail.com. We are in the process of becoming a 501c3, so that's fun. And I say that
I feel your pain.
Nervously. Yeah, nervously. But that's important for this. So, I mean, as an artist who's been working with organizations for 10 years here in Richmond, again, and often, very often, I avoided that because, and I had many people ask me to go that route, but I avoided that because I wanted to stay very nimble and do what I want to do and be able to make these projects. But with this project, I want to be able to hand it to people and they do what they want to do. I can't go to another city and create a Mending Walls. I'm not a part of that community. You know what I mean? I can't do that. But I can use the tools that we created to help maybe validate and help them get funding, right? Or I can tell them the experiences that I had in creating this, so their time in creating something like this is easier. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to kind of amplify and help people go through the process that we went through, and hopefully have it attached to that Mending Walls name to be able to kind of live on. I don't want any ownership to, any other community's project, but I do want to continue like this formula to send that message of empathy and connection and conversation. And so we are currently, doing a lot of different things, and we're just asking that people reach out and let us know the ideas that we have. And if we can't do it, I'm sure somebody has reached out to us that wants to do something similar, and we can be a bridge to connect that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hyatt and Hamilton. Anyone else? Well, feel free to speak up. I will just ask, I'm really curious, Hamilton, what are your thoughts about the significance of the artwork on the pedestal of the Lee Monument? And yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I'll leave it there. You can go for it.
Well, I mean, I honestly, I was sad that it came down. I think I understand the reasons, or at least I have my own presumptions of the reasons it did. But before it did, I always got that question of like, what can replace it? And I was like, what can replace the kind of receipt or the manifestation of a community taking over its, taking over a monument and saying, hey, we're not taking this anymore. We don't agree. This is our space, right? A reclaiming of a space. I couldn't think of anything better that could do that. So I wanted it to stay. And I thought that it was great. One of the things that that also fueled Mending Walls was, there was graffiti and tagging going up on buildings, right? All over the place during the protests. And so my first notion was to just find those places and to be able to kind of keep the conversation going about that, right? Because you knew after this moment, those tags were just going to get power washed over. And I see those tags as kind of unheard voices. That's what graffiti is in general. It's saying, hey, this is dilapidated. No one cares about it. It's mine, right? And so I wanted to do that, but the task in doing that was really difficult, and a lot more than I could chew on. But so yeah, that I honestly thought that it was a national treasure, and it's kind of a shame that it's down now.
Thank you. Lindsay, can you talk about anything you can tell us?
Yeah. So I just want to again say thank you to Hamilton, and just to share that, like, beyond all of this that he's done, he has shown a generosity of spirit, just in ways beyond. I've been talking to Hamilton for the past 2 years, maybe, about trying to figure out what to do about the graffiti on our back wall. And he has been just kind of, I don't know, again, just showed a generosity of spirit that has exceeded all expectation, and it's been really amazing. And we're exploring a potential partnership, nothing set yet, but just exploring the potential partnership to partner with Mending Walls for the back wall of the Richmond Hill Wall, which would be amazing. And I just that conversation continues. And Takia, Hamilton's wife, is just amazing and is another huge part of Mending Walls. And so just wanted to say thank you for all the kind of countless hours at this point talking to me about the Taylor's Hill Park and our wall. So just a huge thank you for that. And we'll kind of be in communication as this exploration continues. But just a huge gratitude, and also, like, God willing, what is to come. So.
Thank you, Lindsay. And thank you, Hamilton. We cannot thank you enough. It was delightful having you with us. If anyone wants to put anything else in the chat, I just see that Kristen and Joel wrote, this has been an amazing presentation. Thank you, Hamilton, for your good work and sharing your gifts with us in the city. Very inspiring. So on those words, we'll close, and we'll be in touch with all of you about the next Koinonia event in March. So enjoy the rest of your evening, and thank you for coming.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.